Welcome to Customs and Courtesies, the show that brings military etiquette and the history behind our customs to you. I am your host, Sergeant First Class Wellington Stirrup. In today's episode, I am joined by a special guest who's going by the name of Master Sergeant Andy. Master Sergeant Andy and I have worked together here in 4th SFAB, which is how I know him, and was able to get him to come onto the show today. Today, he is going to talk about his experience and time down at the U.S. Army's Sergeant Major Academy down in Fort Bliss, Texas, where he is currently at. Today, he talks to me about his experiences there, the relevance of the academy, the benefits that it provides to soldiers, not only in the United States Army, but in our sister services of the United States Coast Guard, Marines, Air Force, I'm sure Space Force eventually, Navy, and even allied partners who send their senior NCOs to this course. A couple of side notes before we get into the show. This show was recorded earlier today in one of the conference rooms in the building that we used to work in together. So the audio might sound a little bit off, and that is why. Also, this is a bit of a longer episode. So that being said, take your time listening to it. And if you feel the need to step away for a while, by all means, do your thing. But I would encourage you to come back because the information that he shares with us today on this episode, I believe, is quite viable and useful for soldiers, even if you are not going to be going to the Sergeant Major's Academy, but still it's useful in terms of leadership. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. All right, so today I have with me, you're a Master Sergeant right now, right?
Yes.
Technically.
Master Sergeant Andy. Yes.
Master Sergeant Andy, who's over at the Sergeant Major's Academy, and he's going to talk to us today about that. So hopefully it's going to be a good show if you guys like it, to whoever listens to this. So Master Sergeant, if you could just go ahead and tell us some stuff about what you do.
Okay, so I'll go by Master Sergeant Andy for this one. I joined the Army back in pre-9/11 days throughout the course of my career.
Yeah, old.
I know, and I feel it. But I've only been on active duty for almost 20 years this June. So I was selected for the academy January of 2023 while I was deployed to Georgia.
Yeah.
So some unexpected beverages at the hotel came about due to the unforeseen news with me and my family. But the ambiance and the mystery that is the Sergeant Major's Academy, for those who have not been, was with me the entire time, right?
Yeah.
I thought, wow, this is the pinnacle of NCO PDS. This is, the epicenter for all the Sergeant Majors that have ever existed, right? So I was like, wow, I really, the imposter syndrome set in. Can I be here? Should I be here? Do I deserve this? Right? All of that was, run through my mind as I left Fort Carson to report to Fort Bliss. So we get there. The academy, just in a nutshell, is about what you would expect for an NCO PDS, right? There's an in-processing process. They do give you ample time to get your family settled for an in-processing that should take 4 days. They give you about 2 weeks. And the thought process is for all those people that are coming with families, they get them situated, get the kids in school. So that's really nice. I was unaccompanied, so a few of us were just like, well, we're going to get some extra time in the gym for the next 2 weeks. But it was, they in-brief you. They give you a lay of the land. You meet the cadre, who are all sergeant majors. The civilians that are on faculty are typically retired sergeants major at some point in their career. Some have been there a very long time. Some just retired recently. It's just, and and they go through a screening process. They all have to have master's degrees. So there's an educated faculty. It's quite different than what you see at ALC, SLC,
Yeah.
ALC. Not that those NCOs aren't educated, right? But it's a different tier of education that goes into the Sergeant Major's Academy faculty.
Right. Because I know when I was at SLC, there was like a lot of us that were there, and we're just like our SGL was sitting there like trying to like tell us some stuff, and one of the guys was an ALC instructor, and was just like, yeah, that doesn't sound right. So then we started kind of like checking him on stuff.
Yeah.
And then we had to write like this 25-page paper, and one of my buddies, like when he got to page 15, was just writing, "This is a 25-page paper. This is 25," just to see if like he was gonna take the time to read it.
Yeah.
And sure enough, we kind of found out that no, he didn't, because he had stopped after like page 5.
Right. And
Just wanted to see if he hit that mark.
There are some, and I'll call them previous generations that are still teaching. A lot of Desert Storm era individuals are on the civilian faculty side. Some of the sergeant majors left the field, 24 months ago. So there's a range of experience. It's interesting when you talk to an instructor that joined the Army when you were born, right?
Yeah.
You're like, wow, there is a lot of time between when you joined and when I joined and where we are at right now. A whole lot has transpired since then. So you do get to bring some relevancy to the program of instruction that's being taught there.
Yeah.
They'll give you a general topic, and then you can correlate it to, like our time in SFAB, Security Forces Assistance Brigade. This is how that pertained to us. But back to the introduction to the academy, they lay out, there's several cohorts, if you will. I just call them like semesters, just because it's just, they used to be called semesters and they changed the terminology apparently.
Bullet point.
So you have the Department of Professional Studies, which was my first term. That really consists of history. It's history heavy, history of the NCO heavy. There's some introduction to workforce development, and there's also a hodgepodge of overview of Army programs. Because what wouldn't be an NCO PDS without Army programs, right?
Yeah.
And then you also, while that's going on, you also get introduced to the APA style of writing, which is what the military attempts to use in conjunction with military writing style. This is it's kind of a come to Jesus moment for individuals that either haven't done collegiate level writing, or it's been some time since they've received their degrees.
Right.
They got them early on in their career. So you get about a 2-week drink from the fire hose of APA 7 writing, instruction. We're going to jump into like your first paper. And a lot of people really struggle. One of my inputs was that individuals that haven't been in collegiate level education come a little bit earlier and do the same introduction to writing that the international students do.
Right.
Not that it's hard to pick up, but right off the bat, when your grades reflect,
it can be tough.
right? It's hard. It's really hard. And I was thankful that I had just finished my bachelor's and was starting my master's. So I was just like, this was just throw more papers in the stack for me. So I was able to facilitate a little bit of help for my battle buddies that had never gone to college or never thought about doing college.
Yeah. That's how it was for me at SLC. Like I was 2/3 of the way through with my master's, and so like it was just like, hey, you guys want me to write a paper? Fine, I can write a paper. Like let's do this.
I can punch out words.
Yeah.
Oh, you want formatting and passive voice? Like
Yeah.
okay, right? And they do provide feedback. There's a rubric involved, right? So it's not just willy-nilly grading. Some instructors, just like college, right, have certain things they harp on versus others, right? I mean, there's some norming throughout the course, but some instructors are very hard on, I want A, B, and C, where others are just like, give me content and make sure you indent the paragraphs. times. Like it just
I would definitely be the give me content, like
right, and that's it's.
I want how you think.
And my professors at UTEP are heavy on content. Their thought process is you didn't get here without knowing APA. So
Yeah.
I don't need you to regurgitate APA by the book, but I want to make sure you understand the contents of what we're teaching, which I think the academy could have a potential takeaway, because a lot of it is what do I need to know to get the grade to continue progressing, not am I really understanding what's being taught.
Right.
And that, given your MOS, your career field, your background, your compo, some of that content is really hard to digest and really understand in a short amount of time. So each semester, as I'll call it, right, it's about 6 weeks long, given on what part of the year you go through. There's, like I said, Department of Professional Studies, there's a joint, there's a Department of Force Management, there's Army Operations, and there's Command Leadership. Those are your 5 that you'll circle throughout the year. I'm currently in Army Operations, which is Atropia heavy. Yeah. So, it's I've gone to Atropia I think 3 times this year, and we still have not won. And we're just back there, just waiting to win Atropia.
You gotta fight for the Atropians.
If we don't,
Remember
who will,
Gorgas.
right? So when you look at Security Force Systems Brigade, that was really beneficial in the joint realm, because you talk embassies, you talk country teams, you talk partners, you talk allies. Great as an SFAT, alumni. The recruiters, the Saturday Night Romeos, they really struggle with that. That's not something that they're introduced to. That's not something that they're familiar with, unless they happen to get it really early on before they transition from whatever MLS they was to a Saturday Night Romeo billet. That is hard for a lot on the grass, but and I'm sure you remember from SLC, it's not so much what we're going to teach, it's the relationships you'll form here that really is your takeaway. Does that sound familiar?
That does sound familiar.
Okay. The same thing applies at the academy. And I will say that the relationships formed do when you're able to see somebody struggling to grasp a concept, right? I'm familiar with this, let's do this, right? Department of Force Management has a majority of it is on sustainment and echelon. So you have strategic sustainment, operational sustainment, tactical sustainment. As an 88 series, super easy for me, right? Just
that's your bread and butter,
right? That's right there. That's my wheelhouse. So it was able to give me some breathing room on some stuff that I could help other students that were struggling.
Yeah.
It's a good part about the networking that happens there, and everyone's there for the same purpose. No one's there to make sure anybody fails, or everyone just wants to get through this together and put their best foot forward. As you move in from the force management to Army operations, it's exactly that. It's Army operations, right? Deployment, how you set up, how you do operations through an AO, nothing super complicated. And from my understanding, Department of Command Leadership is you start out with like a chunk of MRT, and then it teaches leadership philosophy, how to be a better leader. Previous classmates that I live with have told me that Cotter 8-step change model, right? How to do long-term change is part of that curriculum. So we have a couple weeks left when we come back from spring break, and then I will transition to the last term, and then the end is in sight.
Yeah.
And fingers crossed, right? There's going to be a future Sergeant Major me at Fort Carson, so that'll be interesting.
I think you're going to ace that leadership portion.
So I think just because my master's degree is on that, right, that I like leadership, right?
Yeah.
I feel like that's going to be fun for me. I think it comes at a time where I'll be doing my capstone for my master's degree and my second to last class for my master's degree. So while I may enjoy the topics, I don't think I'll have enough time in the day to really focus on fully enveloping what the materials being taught. So I'm going to have those assignments. I'll have my capstone due. I'll have my graduation requirements due.
You're going to be busy.
Be busy person. But for those that are listening that could potentially be going to the academy, I will tell you the workload at the academy is not overwhelming, but it is constant. If you want to throw in secondary education, I think it was 2018, they introduced a bachelor's degree in workforce leadership and workforce development for NCOs that went to the academy. What that entails is once you go to the academy, you can go to the education center just like every other. So your JSTs and your joint school transcripts, all that JST stuff, and you might have to take a couple, anywhere from like a few to maybe a handful of classes, and you can graduate. Just from graduating the academy, you were given a bachelor's. You've earned a bachelor's degree in leadership and workforce development.
Nice, because that was one of the things that I wanted to ask you is, you know, why is it important? What do senior NCOs learn when they're there? What's like the relevancy of the academy? Like, how does it benefit the soldier? Because you guys are all going there to learn how to be sergeants majors, but like you're still soldiers. So how does the school benefit soldiers?
So you said you're going there to be sergeant majors. Day one, they will tell you, we are not here to teach you how to be sergeant's major.
Oh, interesting.
So everyone goes,
why are we here?
What are we doing here, right? Like, I came to learn, right? Like, teach me what we're supposed to. And as the times progressed, I get it, right? At this part in your career, you should already know what it takes to be a sergeant major, right? To be that individual leadership position, whether it's an ops sergeant major, you've seen operations before. It might not be a brigade ops, but a battalion ops, or right, you have a general understanding of what a sergeant major is supposed to bring to the table. And my personal opinion, the curriculum is just kind of there to tweak knowledge gaps that you might not have because you don't know where you're going. Right. Some people like myself, I have never been in a brigade combat team. Never been.
Yeah, I was gonna say you've never been to.
I've never been to CTC. I've never been to YTC, JMR. I mean, I went to JMRC to visit one time, but it wasn't to like work, right? And I'm coming back to be in a a division headquarters, let alone an armor brigade, right? Or a division, armor division. Like, I don't know. But the Army operations semester that I'm currently in, mixed with the force management piece that I learned in the previous semester, have given me a little bit more insight into what I can expect from a formation breakdown, and how employment of those systems work and those organizations work. Because like 4ID, they're everywhere, at least all the time.
Yeah.
Right. If not simultaneously.
Yeah.
Brigades are.
You can have one brigade over here in Europe and the other brigades over in Asia, and PACOM, and
right. And then
the other one's
getting ready to go.
Getting ready to go while somebody else just got back.
Correct.
So it's a beast.
Not having that pre-existing knowledge, it was able to fill in some gaps, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what the benefit of the Sergeant Major Academy is. They will be quick to throw in, how are you going to use this as a Sergeant Major? And a lot of it is, I'm going to advise my commander, right? Or the
you got that down.
Or the book answer of, I'm going to insert myself at the point of friction, right? But what does that mean?
Right.
Where's the point of friction?
Right.
Is it a task board, or is it a motivation? When you say insert yourself at the point of friction or advise your commander, what does that actually mean? And that's where the classroom discussion would come in, and you really do learn from other people's viewpoints. As a sustainer versus a combat arms guy, armor versus light infantry.
Yeah.
There's lots of 82nd versus 173rd jokes, right?
Goodness, yeah.
So it just really depends on who's in that class. I've really learned the most from day-to-day operations is the struggle that the recruiters are having. That has been absolutely eye-opening.
Can you hit on that more?
Basically, the struggle they have with accessions, between the difference in generational stuff that we've seen play out, the impacts of years of war, the impacts of social media, the impacts of the MHS Genesis system, and how they can go into, I think it's all the way in like elementary school level. So if you had a broken bone when you were like 9, they're gonna want paperwork on that. You're good to go, even though you're 18 years old.
Oh wow.
So there's a lot more hurdles for them to overcome than when you and I joined.
Oh wow. Yeah, that's.
So it's tough. Like, and I joke with them, but at the same time, that has probably been my biggest educational piece from peer to peer. Is just what they are going through as an organization right now. And then as real world events happen, right? Real world doesn't stop just because we're in school. So when there's things like Gaza and Israel issue, conflict going on, or media talk about China and Taiwan, right? We have those discussions that where do you see yourself in a couple years, given these potential conflict areas, right? And then we just had the LSV out of Fort Eustis deploy to Gaza to set up that pier. And I know that's going to be a point of conversation when we come back. They're going to look at the 88s and be like, what does this even mean? You're like, well, let me bring you into the world of J-Lots. And you talk a little bit about that. Then you get to educate them, because not everybody
has that like experience.
Yeah, like, infantry guy, I always joke that they wave a wand and logistics occurs, right? Like their MREs in their water and their fuel just arrive magically.
Yeah.
Almost like they wish it. And
We put a request in, and then the bird comes, it brings it to us, and
it just happens.
Yeah.
So getting to educate the infantry guys on the back processes, the behind the scenes stuff that they don't necessarily see when they're out on the objective, right? That occurs to get them the stuff they need to continue to fight and continue their mission. My classmates have come to see a profound love for we didn't know that it was this in depth. I'm like, yes, it's, I know you hear me say log stat and you cringe, but at the same time there are, that is a cascading effect on how we sustain you throughout your, mission and operation. So there's a lot of crosstalk between MOSs, a lot of crosstalk between branches, and I think it comes out with a more robust understanding of what the force looks like when you leave the academy, and then it does give you those networks to interact between people, right?
Roger that first time.
We have a couple individuals coming back to Fort Carson with me. One's an engineer, another one's an infantry guy. So, right, I'll have them direct channels to brigade ops.
Yeah.
Like, hey guys, like this is what I'm trying to plan for your movement. And it just kind of flattens the Army's hierarchy and can get information out a little bit faster. So there's a large benefit to once you graduate, you have that network of peers.
Okay. Yeah, because I know from my short experience in the military, my time in the infantry, I just felt like my time in the infantry was very much like, oh, I'm in the infantry, I'm a grunt, I'm the best, and then it's like, and then I switch over to MI and I'm like, whoa, I was only ever seeing the micro, like we were doing this, and I was thinking like that was like the main effort or whatever for this mission, not realizing that like us doing this meant that like people over here were able to have freedom of movement to do something else.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like seeing the macro versus the micro, like when you're talking logistics, it's like people don't ever think about what goes in.
Yeah.
And I learned that in Afghanistan, and then definitely when I was in Germany in 2CR, like working with NATO allies, and then seeing like, hey, they can't continue this, doing whatever Saber Guardian number we were on, and it's like they can't continue on moving. We're sitting there like, why can't they continue on moving? Like we're pushing in, like we gotta go, and it's like, guys, they're out of fuel. Like they have to wait for resupply.
I would be remiss if I didn't touch on our international partners that are in the course with us. You've got, I believe we had the largest international program to this date. Don't quote me on that, but it's about 59 different students. I can't remember all the countries, but I know there's like 2 or 3, there's 3 from Singapore that are attending. And these are all warrant officers, sergeant majors, forces, and they're going to be the SMAs of their force, the division sergeant majors of their force. So they're the best that their country brings, and they come to.
And they're sending them here.
And they have to do APA. They have to speak English. Like, right? It's a lot, and the information they bring for those that haven't been to Europe, and how we can, with those that have been to Germany and done the rotations and Saber Guardian 472.
Yeah.
Right. The information and relevance they bring is astounding, right? And this isn't the first time that they've ever worked with us.
Right.
Right. There's a Georgian sergeant major that is from Senaki, and I probably driven past your house when we were deployed to Georgia, and we can have those same conversations and build a better shared understanding. And in a public environment, right, the rest of the participants in the class get to hear those conversations, and it builds their shared understanding of what our partner forces bring to the table, how we all fit in a joint fight in Eastern Europe, and then in the Indo-Pacific with our Pacific partners, Japanese, Singapore, right? There's a greater understanding of what the total joint force means for us as an army.
Yeah. So, given your experience there, how, would you say, I mean, obviously it's a beneficial course to go to, but not everybody's going to have that chance. Now that I guess what I'm getting at is now that you've been there, and you went through MLC, right?
I did MLC distance while in Germany as a first sergeant. Not great.
Not great.
Not great.
So what's the comparison there between the academy and
there isn't.
There isn't?
No. Because the online course is 30 days long.
Oh wow.
And you're just punching out time management skills, just trying to survive, right? The in-person is 2 weeks, I do believe. I don't know. I haven't been. I probably should know how long it is in person. But from what I gained in MLC, it didn't really set me up for the academy. And I don't think it's supposed to. I think the academy is its own beast.
Okay.
And rightfully so, because you are entering the next echelon of leadership.
Because I've always held the notion that, you can take a first sergeant and kind of like what you were getting at when I made the comment, like, you're going there to be a sergeant major, and it's like, but you could take a good first sergeant. I mean, you could take a good E7, plop them into a sergeant's major position to hold down the fort, and they can do it. But I guess my thought logic and kind of concern would be if, the academy is its own beast, rightfully so, but at least in between ALC, SLC, you kind of get that hey, this is what's setting you up for the next step, and then it's well, then what's kind of the point of MLC then? If it's not going to somewhat prepare you, because I get not everybody's going to be
Right.
an E9, but
Everyone's not going to be an E9. I think it's the 1%. I think that's what they keep telling us.
I doubt I'll see E9.
I don't.
In my career.
Here's the thing. If I can do it, anybody can. Not that it's super easy. I just never thought I'd make it this far.
Right.
Ever. So, just here to bask in it, better myself, be a little more understanding of the situation of what sergeant majors can take on once they leave the school. The information I keep hearing from the field is enjoy your time at the academy, because once you get out, it's back to the grind. There's no oh, hey, there's an on-ramp. It's you hit the force and you're going.
Right.
So it's been, I don't really enjoy taking the knee, right? You ever hear take a knee.
Take a knee.
This is where you take a knee. I don't know if the academy was taking a knee. It's a different kind of stress.
Yeah.
You're right. You don't have soldiers. You don't have a commander. You don't have someone to advise. You are taking care of yourself academically, but the course load, and I probably made it worse on myself by doing my master's degree. But I was unaccompanied, so
the thought logic is this is perfect time.
Right. If if my family was with me, I would not have done the master's degree because that would have been my focus, was to re-accommodate with my family.
Right.
Instead of doing 4 days and spring breaks and traveling back and forth. But the course load itself, I don't know if it's taken me, because some people academically struggle, right?
Like
and it's
having a hard time.
More stressful than being a line leader, because it's a different kind of stress.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of people make lots of growth in those areas, and from people that originally started, I just got to make a 70 to pass. They're consistently in the mid 90%, and they've seen themselves grow, and that's something I think the academy does, is it puts you in uncomfortable positions, writing papers and presentations and briefings that you might not have been accustomed to, and it forces you to be better.
Yeah.
Just by doing them. And
that's interesting too, because SLC, there were definitely the people there. I'm just here to pass, But I feel like once you leave SLC, and if you're already in def at that point, I don't know, there's like a light switch. Because I know I was definitely there. Like, I went to SLC, I hadn't gone in def yet, still weighing in my mind, am I going to get out, go into reserves, or am I going to stay active? And I think we talked about this and everything. After I went in def and everything, I was like, all right, well, this is my career now. So it's like, I feel like if you're at the Sergeant Major Academy, like, that's, even if you go there, like, I'm just trying to here to pass, like.
And we joked, in my core room, we joked, like, here's a 70. I'm like, well, look, here's the thing. If you aim for a 70 and you miss,
oof,
right, it could be a wrap.
Yeah, because what's going to happen?
So you aim as high as you possibly can, and then if you miss the mark, you got some dropout between you and a failing grade. And the other thought process that we joked about was, I know it's new, it's uncomfortable, so everyone's just kind of like, I'm just trying to survive. But you don't make it to the Sergeant Major's Academy by just surviving throughout your career. You've performed well, you've performed consistently, and that's why you're there.
Yeah.
So we had to have a real, conversation in our classroom about the nervousness of just trying to make it, right? Just trying to survive, to the actuality of you do care, because if you didn't, you wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
Right? You didn't make it this far.
Because I feel like anybody that's making it that far, like, yeah, they can joke, like a PT test, you can joke like, I'm just going to do the bare minimum, and then you're out there trying to crush the whole thing.
Yeah.
Like you have that drive. You're not just going to try to,
And that's what I told my friends, that I'm like, look, I'm not trying to make Commandant's List. I'm not trying
that's
to
a
make
whole nother
Distinguished Honor Grad, whatever all that is. But I am trying to do the best for me.
Right.
If that's a 99, cool. If I do my best and I get an 80, still cool. Put my best foot forward, right? Because you're not always going to hit the mark. It might be something you learn for the first time. You're just like, let me just put myself out there, right?
Right.
But as long as you're consistently doing the best that you can, I think that is what automatically gets you well above a 70.
Yeah.
Right. And as the career or the course has progressed, I don't hear a lot of "I'm just trying to pass. I'm just trying to survive" anymore. I think we're in the groove. We're accustomed. We're familiar with the expectations, and everyone's gotten a little bit more comfortable.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that everyone's always. They might be a little too comfortable, and that has had detrimental effects. I think we started out with like 500 and something folks. I know that we are not at 500 something folks right now. I don't know an exact number, but I do know that there are people that were there day one that are not there right now.
So what happens if you aren't there anymore?
Well, so there's some things. A good friend of mine that was in my core room, and he happened to live at the YMCA with me. He went and saw behavioral health. He was having some issues, and they reassigned him, and I believe he gets to come back next year distance learning. Not entirely sure. That was from him. Think about what happens if you fail an NCO PDS. Like, I know it's the academy, but it's still an NCO PDS, right?
Right.
So if you fail as a Sergeant First Class at SLC, what happens?
It's not good. That's like a career ender right there, pretty much. much.
Same thing. I would assume same thing occurs. They have different types of dismissals, right? So I think that obviously is that right if it was a negative dismissal or a life
like
issue.
medical,
right?
Yeah, that's fine.
Correct. Like there's different issues, different
versus
results.
you were just bad.
Think about academic dishonesty.
Yeah, dishonesty. Like you cheated and got caught plagiarizing.
Right. Plagiarism is a thing, and they hammer that for every day. I mean, every time. Do not do the wrong thing.
Yeah.
They just right. And the instructors are very well versed in APA. They're very well versed in English language and military writings. Like they're good. They're not perfect, but they're good. And people still plagiarize it. I don't know if it's just they get too comfortable, they think they can just get away with it, or if it's too much of a workload or whatever. And they, hard times make people do hard things.
Right? Yeah.
And it happens, right? And it's just like every other NCO PDS. People choose to do wrong. They self-select throughout the course, and just like SLC, ALC. I don't think there's enough time in MLC, but who knows? That you can still self-select for whatever reason, and you're no longer a participant in that course. So but the detrimental effects are still there.
So speaking of, the SLC, MLC, and like time, I know we were talking about it earlier with, learning some of the stuff that you're learning is not going to be applicable to what you're doing. And then, I know you said that one of the things you probably would do is, you come here for a little bit, and then you go back, and then you go.
Yeah.
And I know that's what one of my friends in the Navy was telling me. That's what they kind of do. It's like, if you are in this billet and that's your MOS, you've already been to the school, you're good. But if you're in the same MOS field, but you're filling a different billet because manning shortage or whatever, they're like, hey, we're going to send you to that school to train you up, and then you're going to come back and do that. And so it's kind of like you get an ASI and SQI in a sense.
Which you get coming out of the academy, you get a 6 Sierra, automatically 6 Sierra identifier attached to you. But there's a lot of stuff like force management, talking POM, program or memorandum, I believe. My instructor would probably be really mad if I got that wrong. But there's only so much space in his head in each term, right? Makes the challenges.
Yeah.
You're talking force management model, you're talking acquisitions, right? That stuff might be really relevant to people that are going to work on cross-functional teams for Army Futures Command post-academy. If you're going to go be a battalion sergeant major, might not be as relevant. Still good information to have, might not be as relevant. History of the NCO. That's everyone should know the history of your corps, right?
Right.
So it's gaps of how you want to learn, right? If you feel this is stupid, and that's your mentality going into, learning about the acquisitions process or sustainment at the operational level, then you're just going to have that mindset, and there's nothing that's going to make that better. But I feel if you're going back to the force, a solid 90% of the academy is extremely relevant to you right out of the gate. Even force management, because that talks about FMS web, seats to, spaces to seats, and how your MTOs are built, stuff like that. So it just gives you a better understanding of the larger picture of the Army. Whereas if you're going back to recruiting command, you might, right, the joint environment might not be as applicable to you.
Right.
We do have sister services that are attending as students. So we have Coast Guard, Air Force, a couple Marines. I don't think there's any Navy. No. And we have cross services instructors. There's a female NCO that teaches one of the departments. So they're learning nothing relative to them, right? But they're soaking it in. They're getting all the same briefs about Army Futures Command or DA 357 that we are, and they're just like, the one thing I hear most from our sister services is, my God, you guys are massive. Like
Yeah.
then they're just just giving down a brigade combat team breakdown or a division breakdown of an organization. They're like, that is incredibly large compared to what we are used to. The Coast Guard, they're just mind blown
Yeah.
by the size and scope of the Army.
Yeah, I remember talking with one of my friends who's in the Australian Defence Force, and we were talking about like the size of a unit, and I was trying to explain to him the size of my battalion. I was like, probably 5,000 people is what like a fully staffed battalion, like a combat battalion. He's like 5,000 people. He's like, mate, that's like a division for us. And I was like, well, how many people do you have at this base here? And he's like, oh, maybe like 2,000. And I was just like, oh. And he's like, what? And I was like, that's like, I wouldn't even consider that a base for us. Like that's so small.
The international partners do country briefs, which is just you're familiar with it, the National Instruments of National Power,
Yeah.
dying briefs. They give one of their country with a little bit of culture, a little bit of humor, and there's several things that always stick out to me. Is one, they always overlay the size of their country over Texas.
Yeah, Texas.
Always they're like,
it's a good measure.
You can fit 39 of my country in Texas, right?
Yeah.
It's always fun. You're like, okay, that's all right. We get it. Texas is massive. We understand.
Yeah.
Or they'll overlay it over the United States, right? Or we can fit 4 of our country in the United States, whatever the country is. The other is the size of their forces and the money spent on
there,
right? And you're talking country A has a budget of $8 billion.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just 8. Like, wow. You see how big of a industry and force that we are as the military in general, just with our national defense budget. It's dwarfs every other country.
Yeah.
When you're talking, their army has 10,000 people. You're like, wow. Like
that's a small security
that
force. That's not even
correct.
NYPD is like 57,000 strong.
It's your whole army, and we have a division that matches.
Yeah.
So you just see like the size and scope of the U.S. Army and the total force itself is what we bring to the table, and why we are the expeditionary force, and it's so important to NATO and our allied partners.
Yeah.
It really puts it in perspective.
Yeah. Have you seen though with like sister services? So like Coast Guard, for instance, have you seen I guess like a level of like maturity or confidence with them there? Because I have a friend who's in the Coast Guard, and I remember when she was like an E3, she had the same levels of responsibilities and duties that I had as like an E6, because they're just so small.
So my buddy, he was in we had a couple rooms back to back, and his constant thing was, why is the Army the way it is? And I'm like, I'm gonna need you to break that down, because there's a lot
in there.
And it was the rules and stipulations we have in place. They just don't have that in the Coast Guard. But it comes with the type of service, the size of our service, and they get that. Because they have like fire watch, and like not like we have, like they have like the watch officer, they have, and he's like, well, because we're on a boat. And I'm like, I don't understand that, because I stay on land.
Yeah.
And I use an airplane to get from land A to land B.
Yep.
Right? So they just have, there's intersects. Typically, the intersections best happen when we talk about soldier stories, about Soldier A did this back in the day and got in trouble for this. The Coast Guard's right there with us. The Air Force right there with us. The Marines will,
Yeah.
Marines are gonna Marine.
Yep.
So, and even the international partners have stories about this guy and that girl, and so there's, when you look at the diversity of the academy, you see that regardless of combo, regardless of nationality, service, like we're really all bred from the same buffoonery, right? That the E4 Army like bred us to be.
Oh, yeah.
And it's builds an understanding and a commonality that I don't think I ever got with my SLC partners, right? Because in the 88 series SLC, they have all of the different sub MOSs together.
Right.
Still not a level of understanding and caring about each other like that we've established at the academy.
Yeah, I noticed that at SLC for my class, which was really weird because, you know, SLC you'll get like ALC you're with your whole like just your MOS, and in SLC they're trying to bring the whole, you know, CMF together, right? And but what was weird with my SLC class was there was I think 98 of us, and only 5 were not the same MOS.
Wow.
Yeah, so it just felt like an ALC reunion. But when we were learning there, you know, the instructors were like, "Oh, this is where this plays in," and we're like, "Well, how does that relate to our MOS?" Like, and they were like, "Well, that you got to look at the bigger picture."
Yeah.
And that's what like me and Josh kept like telling like our small group was like, "You guys aren't looking at the bigger picture here. Like, we're not here to do, you know, this like our job. Like, we're here to learn how to manage the CMF."
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think that's interesting.
Yeah, and you see it with the varied MOSs within the classrooms. Like as a transportation guy, right, I had a unique experience as being in the strategic airlift NCO and a battlefield coordination attachment. What is that? I still don't really know, other than it's a bunch of fires individuals, and they run a myriad of missions. But the biggest takeaway was I learned about the Joint Fires Enterprise.
That's cool.
And I didn't understand. I thought things just shot, right? I thought they just made things go boom from far and light distances. And being really bored because, you know, when we do CPXs and all that, we never get to like the logistics heavy stuff because it's not cool, right? We do like kinetic force on force stuff on the CPX computers. And so I would just plop myself down in the fire cell and hang out with my friends and be like, what's that do? Who are you? And they're like, oh, I'm a JTAC. Like, why are you an Air Force dude in art? You know?
Yeah.
And just learning and thinking that was just an instance in my memory that it's not going to be relevant. Fast forward to the academy.
Here it is.
We're talking, into the joint department. We're talking, you know, the Joint Force Air Component Commander, the Component Force Land Component Commander, or sorry, Coalition Force Component Land Commander, CFLIC. All of that was, people were really having a hard time breaking down warfighting functions in that area. And me and a fires guy just started talking. And we ran through the entire Joint Fires Enterprise within about 20 minutes. And it was that related experience that was able to educate the entire class, because people, 42 alphas, aren't exposed to that. Recruiters aren't exposed to that.
Right.
Most 88 series aren't exposed to that. Really, it's fires, MI, right? You got a couple weird loggies. That's about it. So it was those, you see the diversity in your assignments really being able to play out and help educate not only your peers but also your instructors, because they haven't had those moments either in their career.
Yeah.
When someone talks about being in the invasion of Iraq, and you're like,
What?
I'm sorry, what? And like, oh, the first one. I'm like, no, you don't get to call it the invasion of Iraq. That's Desert Storm. You get your own name. Like, don't be taking our name.
Yeah.
And hearing that, right, they don't have anything GWAT level. Right? So you bring the GWAT experience, you bring the post-GWAT experience to not only your classmates, but your instructors as well. And they, you know, get some notes, get to throw down some stuff, and makes it better for the next iteration, which is really, you know, a goal is always to, you know, make it better than you got it.
Right. So would you say that then I would say that the academy is just ever growing, like ever changing and evolving, but taking what you're learning now, bringing it back to the force. How do graduates? Obviously, you're going to bring back what you learned when you're, you know, filling your billet, but how does the next generation bring that forward? Like, do you get what I'm saying? Like, where's the continuity of like?
So, I think leaving the academy, I know hindsight's always 2020. What do I wish I knew going into the academy? To me, that puts a re-emphasis on getting NCOs to battle staff, using the knowledge that you gain in battle staff. It's been a clear indicator that those that have gone to battle staff have a better grasp on the course material that pertains to that. Even if, like, I went as a staff sergeant, I didn't really use it till right before the academy in SFAB, and that was only because my commander made it a thing. So that set me up a little bit better. Those that have never been to battle staff, you find us that have been teaching operational terms and graphics, right? Just so they can speak the map and they can understand what the map presents. So a renewed emphasis on that, because it not only makes you smarter within your own organization, but you can go forward to a different country and you can all look at the map and understand what is occurring even without speaking the same language.
Right.
And our foreign partners, really good on operations terms graphics, so it's just bringing that capability together and expanding the total force. There's a myriad of leadership styles at the academy in the students. Some are very black and white, some are a little more gray, some are very gray, some are very it is what it is type of, right? So you see a myriad of leaders, and I don't think a year course is going to change anybody's explicit leadership style that they prefer. I do think it opens up to understand that other leadership styles exist and that you should go back to the force as a sergeant major in whatever capacity sergeant major you are, and develop those leaders with various leadership styles so that they can understand that there might be positions and instances that they're presented with, but their style isn't ideal, and they can pivot to a different leadership style to make them more successful.
Okay.
I see a lot of real renewed emphasis on Army writing. I know Chief of Staff and the SMA have gone to the Hardening Project and renewed leadership writing. I think people see the benefit of improving their writing coming out of the academy. I don't know if they see it as in the form of educational writing, right? We don't really do strict Army writing all that often. It's more APA blended for papers and even you try to do APA on like PowerPoint presentations. So I think an emphasis on education, secondary education, to get better at writing so that you're not necessarily behind the curve when you get to that level. And it's not only, in my opinion, secondary education isn't necessarily for the Army. I look at it as, because you're not going to wear that uniform forever.
Right.
That pays dividends well beyond what it does for your promotion point worksheet or your NCOER.
Yeah.
Right? It's just better as you as a person to be more educated in general, and hopefully it's something you enjoy, so you can actually enjoy talking about it.
Right. And I know that's like the big push too. Is what was it that Sergeant Major Grinston always said? Something about like continuous learning or ongoing education.
Oh,
lifelong learner. Yeah, lifelong learner. Yeah. So.
Yeah, lifelong learning is a thing. I think it's just whether you're forced to or you enjoy it.
Right.
Right. Because if you're at the academy, you're at SLC, you're there, so you're gonna learn it whether
Regardless.
you want to or not.
Yeah.
So you might as well just embrace it. There are some mumblings that the accreditation for the academy, some people have came with the mindset of that we're trying to make the NCO Corps more officer.
Yeah, I've heard that.
And I get it, right? A key to being an officer is a degree. I got it. But I think the real focus is just a better educated enlisted force.
Right.
And it just happens to materialize itself in the form of a degree plan at the Sergeant Major's Academy.
Yeah. Plus, I think that's one of the things that sets us apart from other countries. Like, our company yesterday was over at the NCOA here on post. going through the IOC course,
Okay.
like the instructor, observer course, and our chief and our first sergeant brought up how sometimes working with host nation partners, once they find out that you're like E6, E7, they don't want to work with you because you're not an officer, because that's just how they kind of do things. And so I think that is kind of like the difference between our military is like you have a lot of enlisted soldiers here that have higher education or are working on higher education.
Correct.
And it's like I knew a dude who had this was an 11 Bravo. He was an E4, had a master's degree in accounting and like forensic science, and then joins the Army. And we're like, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
As a 11 Bravo, like,
yeah,
you could be the accountant, like real life, not Ben Affleck the accountant.
Yeah.
Like you could be why, and it's
Yeah.
just like he's like I just felt a calling, like this is
Yeah.
what I needed to do, and it's like respect, man, and
right, because you could have taken a career path with your education, right?
Yeah.
And you're choosing to serve the country and not necessarily in the most financially viable manner, right?
Yeah.
Right, you're still choosing
With
to
your
be
finance
enlisted.
degree.
Right, like, I don't know if that says something about the finance degree
Right.
or the person.
But-
But I've had soldiers, bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, and it used to be, why aren't you an officer?
I got that all the time when I was a junior enlisted soldier. Like, especially when they find out that I was in ROTC in college.
Oh, yeah.
Or like we would be out on a platoon run and I'd run into a former ROTC buddy and they're like, Stirrup, what's up, man? I'm like, hey, what's up, sir? And then my platoon sergeant's like, Stirrup, why are you talking to an officer?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I know them from college. And they're like, why aren't you an officer? And it's just like,
And
things happen, life happens.
I run into the same thing with NCOs that want to be warrant officers.
Yeah.
While yes, your education can give you those things, I don't want to necessarily take all of the best
Yeah.
and send them to officers or send them to warrant officers, because the NCO Corps still needs good NCOs and good educated NCOs. Now, if that's what your personal goal is, right, I am more than happy to support. But I'm never like, oh, you have a degree, let's get you a degree to go.
Yeah.
Might not be what you want.
Right.
Right? Maybe you're happy being a sergeant E5 or staff sergeant, going through the enlisted ranks, and that's really what I'm more enthused about, is helping you pursue your goals, regardless of what they are for the Army. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think in the academy we have a lot of at least bachelor degrees. I know of quite a few master's degrees already. People that have already completed the master's prior to, and I don't know if they're going for their doctorate. I hope not, because that's a whole lot of school
Yeah.
on top of already school.
I know. I keep telling my mom, because she has her doctorate. She's like, "Oh, when are you gonna go for you?" I'm like, "No, I'm done. I'm done. My master's degree just about broke me. I'm done."
Yeah. I look forward to never cracking a textbook again
Yeah.
in May. But and it was never about the Army. Like, I didn't want to get a master's degree for
Right.
the Army.
Yeah.
I didn't want to, because I was never going to be an officer, right? That ship sailed years
Long
ago.
time ago.
Long time ago. It was more about how do I improve myself,
Yeah. And just setting
and
yourself
how
up for afterwards.
right, for post Army, because that is a
You have a life after.
it's coming, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
you can't
in a-
do this forever.
in an organization where you can retire early 40s,
Yeah.
right? That is an entire life to live post Army. Why not use those tools and benefits the Army gives you to set yourself up for success?
Yeah.
In whatever form that looks like. Did I need a master's degree? Probably not. Was I presented with an opportunity to get a master's degree for free? Yes. And would I be stupid to not jump on that? Also yes.
Yep.
So thanks to the MOA with UTEP and the Sergeant Majors Academy, I get constructive credit for 3 classes. So it was stupid for me not to when I wasn't there with my family.
Right.
I've even shamed, and I'm proud to say it, I'll say it. I shamed a couple of my peers into their bachelor's degrees for the LW, the Workforce Development bachelor's degree through the academy, because they weren't doing anything.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I got off, we got out of class at 1500. You're doing your homework time, which is 15 to 1700, right? And after 1700, they go, just bored. I'm like, why aren't you in school? Like, it's free. You can be a step ahead of your, whatever you want to do. And
I don't need it.
Right, like I don't need it. I'm like, yeah, you don't need it, but you might need it later.
Yeah.
Right, you might need it later. Just leg up on the competition.
Yeah.
And 2, 3 of them have started their bachelor's degree with the LWD, and we talk at the gym every morning, and they're like, "It's your fault that I'm in statistics right now," and I'm like, "But there's an end in sight, and there's a goal." Right. There's a goal.
There's
Keep
a goal
your eye
there.
on the goal. Once the goal's done, you can look back and be like, "Holy shit! Look what I've accomplished." Right. And then you can go to your soldiers and say, go back to the old adage of, I wouldn't tell my soldiers to do something I haven't done or willing to do myself.
Yep.
Right? I don't have time. You don't have time because I did a school while I was in a school.
Yep.
Right? While with a family.
Yep.
Right? Why shouldn't you, at least, I'm not saying go full bore, right? But like, a class here,
A class here, class there. I've sat so many soldiers down and had that conversation with them, and I love it when they're like, but I don't have the time. And I'm like, bro, we are in the same freaking platoon. You're my soldier, right? Like, you are my soldier, and I'm in class right now. So, like, do you really think that if, I have just as much work as you're doing?
Yeah.
Probably, if not more, because I'm in this leadership position, and I won't forget, one of my soldiers asked me, how do I have the time? No, it wasn't one of my soldiers. It's my buddy Jeff, the human guy. It was like when we were standing up this unit, we were standing up for SFAT. He was like, how do you have the time? And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, you're getting your master's. You have, at the time, my kid was 3. So he's like, you have a toddler. So you're doing father time, husband time, standing up this unit, getting this program going. You're in your master's program. Like, where do you find the time? And I was like, I make the time. Like, I weigh what's important to me, and then what's not.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I've been crushing it at the gym 3 days out of the week. Maybe I can stay up a little bit later, focus on this school project, and then cut my workout maybe 20 minutes short. Or instead of chilling during lunch, crack open the book and get to the schoolwork.
I think the support system also plays a role in your ability to have that time. Right?
Yeah.
Like, your wife was a great part of you being able to carve out a little bit of time to accomplish those. And for those teams that can't do it, if they go to the academy and they don't have time, the individuals that are enrolled in the master's program, I'll speak to UTEP just because that's what I know. There's an understanding that we're all in the same boat.
Right.
And we have a group chat, right? We're like, hey, don't forget this is do this. Like, we internalize, make sure everyone's on
that accountability. Yep.
Right? Make sure everyone's doing the goals, make sure everyone's hitting the marks, because we all want to graduate together, right? And I think if it was just me doing an online course by myself, I would not be nearly as motivated, right, to complete this. My wife, love her to death. She's full-time teacher with 2 kids, 3 dogs, school sports, the whole 9.
Yeah.
And she's doing that by herself. Like, and she still supports my decision to get a better education.
That's tough.
Right, and I don't get to say a damn thing to
Yeah.
her because
Yeah.
that is a workload and then some. And she still finds time to support me, make sure that I'm still motivated, engaged with both. Right, she calls it day school and night school, and just as much as day school as it is night school, I think the emphasis on night school is a little more pertinent, because if you don't get a passing grade, you have to pay it back.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But then the other part is, if you don't pass the day school, it might be the end of your career.
Yeah.
So there's a support system that needs to be in place.
Yeah.
And that's why I ask, if any soldier that wants to do that, like, shit, I'll be your support system.
Right.
Like, I've been there. I did one class at a time for a long time.
Oh yeah.
Way longer than I care to admit.
I mean, I'm at almost 14 years, and it took me, like, I left college, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. Anybody who knows me knows, I left college with only having to complete 1 class. from getting my degree. Even my recruiter was like, bro, we can push your ship date back, just so you can finish that class. I'm like, nope. I want to get in. It was math. I was like, I'm definitely afraid of math. That scares me. No. And it took me 6 years until I finished my bachelor's.
Yeah.
And then
It was longer than that.
And then I started on my master's almost right away, and that took me. I just got it August, like this past August. So it's like, yeah.
And there's a big emphasis from the academy on doing the BA. It's called the BALWD. The emphasis is you're gonna do the course load anyway,
Yeah.
because it's built into
Into
the curriculum for the academy.
Right.
Why not just get something out of it by doing a couple more classes?
Yeah.
Right. So I think one buddy's got a math class and a public speaking class, and that's it.
Yeah.
And maybe like a history class, and then he's got his bachelor's, and it's for the same work that he would be doing anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway, right?
We had that at when I reclassed down in Huachuca. They had Cochise College come in, and they told us like, hey, all you have to do is pay $30, and when you graduate, you'll get the credits for this, and then when you come back for ALC, you pay another $30, and then you'll have an associate's in intelligence studies. And there were people that I knew that were like, I don't need that. I'm like, okay, as a person who went to college and as a person who's been doing college my entire time in the Army, I'm telling you right now, $30. You're already here. You're taking the courses. You don't have to do any extra right now, right?
Yep.
Unlike at the academy for you, like you don't have to do any extra. It's literally you coming and doing your job at this school, and you just paying $30. There's an associate's, and there were guys that I knew at SLC that were still like, I don't need this, and I'm like, and then they were finally like, oh, they showed up to SLC like, oh. Is Cochise coming by? Like, can I get, and it's just like, yeah, man, because that's the cheapest degree you're ever gonna get.
Yeah.
So you're talking $60 for just showing up to the NCOA.
Yep.
That's it. Like that's it.
That's the thing. Like for the academy folks, TA covers.
Yeah, TA would cover the other part.
classes. They cover it all, right? And you have up to 5 years post graduation to use those additional school requirements that you need to still get credit for the BALWD. So even if you don't want to, right, and it's not the right time for everybody to go to school, because like I said, if my family was there, I would not be doing a master's degree.
Yeah.
I would be enjoying my family, and I do not fault anyone choosing to re-engage with their family.
Yeah.
Because we've just
100%.
been grinding, right? But 5 years after post graduation, like you have no reason not to.
Yeah.
And it makes you better. It makes you relevant. It makes you a little more relevant because you do have that higher education, and it helps you speak on things at a different level than someone without it, right?
Right.
That's, I think, part of the academy curriculum, because we're supposed to be advisors to lieutenant colonels, colonels, right? The education makes you more smarter on those topics than you might have been been without the academy.
Right.
So while I don't need to know, I'll pick force management just because that was an area I struggled. While I might not need to know force management, but if I could talk to my commander and advise him on personnel moves based upon a coming MTO, which is something I learned about in force management, right? I've made myself that much more of a valued advisor to that battalion commander, that brigade commander, as an ops sergeant major, right? And Department of Army Operations, I learned A, B, and C. I can have that conversation as an ops sergeant major with CSM and the colonel, make myself more relevant and a more trusted advisor to who I'm supposed to be influencing.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is great. Like, yeah. And I think that's also a good thing too, because you think about like what you just said, you're working right next to that 05, 06 and above like, you having that knowledge and then you having that degree on top of that, to me, it just gives you more like credibility. Like, not that they're probably doubting your credibility, because, I mean, if I was an 05, I'm not going to doubt my sergeant major's credibility. Like that to me would kind of like.
But I think that's how we got to the walk on the grass tropes and the 670-1 sergeant majors.
Yeah.
Right.
What's gonna be your card?
So, when I came to I was going to the academy, I heard I get a lobotomy and I get a pet peeve. We're going into the last semester here shortly, and I have not received either that I'm aware of. Right. I might have gotten a lobotomy and not even noticed. Maybe it was part of the processing. I don't know. I think my pet peeve is the same thing that it's always been, and it's just doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we've talked headgear.
Yeah.
Right? We've had long talks about headgear.
I called a guy out this morning at Peterson.
It's a simple thing, right? Doing the simple things. Doing the right things. I think that's going to be my pet peeve. If they assign me another one, I think I'm just going to decline it and keep going with my just do the right thing. That's been my my safety brief as a first one was don't do dumb shit, right? Like, it's simple. Just do the simple right things. And then the lobotomy, maybe that comes before graduation. I don't know. There is noticeable generational differences in the sergeant majors you see in the field now, right? At the high, the old, I call them the old heads.
Yeah.
Right. And then you see the students in class 74. And there is a stark difference in thought processes, how to go after tasks.
Yeah.
What regulations and rules are stupid. Right?
Yeah.
I'll just
like
say
what
it.
what should be applied and
Why
what
shouldn't
kinda,
we change, right?
you know.
Beards is an ongoing conversation, and I still stand by the people that are the loudest are the ones that can't grow them.
Yeah.
So
that's a fact.
Hands in pockets,
pockets.
walking on grass,
Yep.
those are still things. And even the civilian instructors that were sergeant majors in the mid 90s, hands in pockets is still a pet peeve for them. Like, they understand that they're civilians. Like, we see you guys with your hands in your pockets, and it's just like that just never goes away. It never goes away.
My retort I always like with that is, have you watched a TED Talk? Like, you have all these professionals. Like, I had a lieutenant colonel one time. He asked a buddy of mine. The dude had sideburns within regulation.
Yeah.
And the colonel one day walks by and he's like, you should really think about shaving those sideburns, specialist. And he was just like, respectfully, sir, they're within regulation. And he was just like, would you trust a doctor or a lawyer who had sideburns? And he was like, yes, because they're a doctor or a lawyer. Like, he's like, sideburns do not determine your knowledge.
Yeah.
It's like, and they're within the regulation.
Yeah. Like your PT score doesn't equal your ability to lead, right? It doesn't. I will say that it is a aspect of your leadership ability.
Yeah.
It's
you're taking care of yourself,
right? You're physically fit, right? You are fit enough to make you're attempting to be fit enough to make yourself harder to kill.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that is a thing that the Army, right?
Yep. That's
our job, right?
That's our
land,
job.
land combat, right? It is not the defining piece, but it is a piece.
Right. I got a side note on that, by the way, with the PT test and
the ACFT, right?
Yeah.
The academy, you do two. You do one in October-ish, and you do one in April-ish. You don't really do it in the winter because El Paso, even though it's El Paso, it's still the wind. It's cold. It's not great at night and early in the morning.
It's a desert.
It is out there. Great city, good food, good people, but it is out there. They talked about the ACFT ad nauseum about whether or not, and it's just between classmates, whether or not the ACFT should have scores, go, no go, whatever. And I don't think that'll ever be a nullified subject.
Yeah.
Anytime soon. because none of us can come to a conclusion, a consensus on what the best way for that would be.
I had a squad leader when I was still at Lewis, so my first duty station, and I remember asking him, I remember back then they would smoke me and they'd be like, oh, you can't get stirrup with push-ups or sit-ups. Like that guy will just go forever. Like make him do wall sits. Yeah, and that's what smoked my legs. And so I just remember asking him one time, like, why is it that your APFT score is so, revered? Like, why do we care so much about this stupid score? And he was just like, well, he's like, if you think about it, he's like, let's say I take you and your friend Cobb and I compare you two. You're both team leaders. You're both doing the same exact job. You're both crushing it. Like everything on paper is matching up even. But we only have one slot to send, to this school. That's why it comes down to the PT test. Like, okay, well, everything else, there's no other determining factor.
Yep.
What's this dude's PT score? And yeah.
I think some of it, I think, is...
that's when it clicked for me. It was like, I understand now.
I think PT builds character.
Yeah.
Not necessarily organized PT.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of organized PT. I'll do PT all day long if you want me to, but once you mention organized PT, I shut down. I'm like, this is a waste of my time.
So SMA Retired Daily recently talked to the Class 74, and PT was one of his 10 things.
Yeah, he's a cool dude. I met him in Egypt.
Super great speaker, and like he talked about that time is where you build your team. Makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't think it necessarily has to be doing PRT, right?
Yeah.
But as a squad, PT at some point in the day, as long as it's together, right? You could be doing a workout in the gym together. You don't need to be doing the bend and reach necessarily. That's my personal opinion.
Same.
But that time to build it, right? That cohesive team is there. My team in SFAB, we would go to the gym, and even the 4 SFAB motor pool gym.
Yeah.
Right. We were the first ones in there. We weren't necessarily doing the same workouts, but we were there together.
Right.
Motivating each other, helping each other. Right.
Yep. Builds that camaraderie.
It's just right. You have a little insight into what makes a person tick when they're deadlifting or squatting, or they're just improving themselves in whatever capacity that the gym environment or the PT environment brings.
Oh yeah, because you could definitely hit a deadlift with motivation from others, and then go back, and try to do it dead silence, and it's not happening.
So when we do PT, Class 74 does PT 1 day a week. Unless you have a 540, you scored 540 and above, then you don't have to come to PT. So that's the standard for now. I believe the next class, Class 75, may be doing PT 3 days a week. I don't quite know, but the 540 exemption would still exist, so that hey, if you're going to Class 75, you make sure you get a 540 and above on that first ACFT, and then you can go back to doing your own thing. But there's talk of, is that right in a student environment, in the student body, right? Is PT 1 day a week worth it, right? Some conversations have been had with elder sergeants major about the thought process of, well, if we don't do PT here, we're not going to do PT with our next organizations. I think that's my personal opinion is that's, there's no causation or correlation, right?
Yeah.
Like that doesn't mean anything. That's just your thoughts. But I know as an adult in the Army, you understand you have to do PT.
Yeah.
And if you don't, there are consequences. And I think that's how everyone operates at the academy, in the student body wise, is that you're a grown up, you're either doing the right thing or you're not. And if you don't do the right thing, like not doing PT, you're going to self-select.
Right.
And it's going to come out the way it is any other time you self-select. It is what it is.
Yeah.
I think, I'm trying to think if there's anything else that's a nuance for the academy. Your typical day, 09. Typical day 09 to 1500 with a lunch from 12 to 1. and then you're on what is called research time because you have homework. Either it's read-aheads, working on papers, presentations. So you have 15 to 1700 built in where you're not necessarily at the academy, but you are doing academy work.
Right.
But it's on your own, right? At your own pace and whatever you want to call that. So I go back to the room at the YMCA and I'll start cracking on papers or, sometimes there's a bunch of reading to do, anywhere from like 70 to 110 pages some nights. And it's doctrine, so it's super awesome. It's super interesting.
Yeah.
Super incredible, interesting.
I learned that the Marines have the best doctrine at SLC. It's so cut and it's just, they had us reading Marine doctrine at SLC, and what one thing we realized is like they will literally be like, this pencil is blue, it writes blue, and it's like, why don't we do that? Why do we have to have like I am writing you a novel, you're gonna read this?
And I think the Army, Army doctrine, it's not regulation, right? It's not law. Doctrine is the basis for what we're able to do and how we can pivot, expand what we need to do to accomplish the mission. So I think when you look at regulations, and I pick on some of the instructors because they talk about hands in pockets, and I put my thumbs in my pockets.
Yep.
Right? Thumbs are not hands.
Yep.
Words have meanings, right? So the instructors look at me and they're like, come on now. I'm just saying, thumbs are okay.
Yeah.
Fingers are okay. Whole
Whole
hands,
hand?
not
Okay.
so much, right? Whereas doctrine says, this is how you're going to execute, this is how you should execute whatever, right? But there's deviations that you learn through experience and additional knowledge that can help you pivot that. I think if you were to say, this is the only way to do maneuver A, right, that doesn't depict the real world. Like the Marines like, this is blue, this is blue, this is blue. Whereas that scenario might not be what plays out in real life.
Yeah.
Right? So it gives you the thought process to maneuver and pivot with inside that gray zone, if you will. But you have to know that fundamental, the pen is blue, right? The fundamental knowledge, and then be able to expand into more creative means if need be. Like moving from, I don't want to put hands in my pockets, but I'll put my thumbs in my pockets.
All right, well, I gotta get back to work.
Okay.
So
I'm on spring break, so
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to impart and leave? Last thing, for any of the listeners out there.
Just soldiers. As soldiers, I would ask that you guys pursue the benefits that the Army gives you, right? Whether it's education or certificates from the Credentialing Online program. To the senior leaders, just ask you guys to take care of your individuals, your subordinates. Part of leadership is leading like you would like to be led, and I think that we miss the mark on that sometimes. And I think as a force, we would be better off if we got back to, is this how I would like to be treated, right? Like the golden rule, right?
I had an episode on that.
Yeah, and then no, that'd be it. I have we wanted, if your listeners want to do a second one, by all means, we can go ahead and jump into. We could talk to capstone, the performance, or it's called the PWP. It's a writing assessment for the academy. Like your two big papers at the end. We could jump into what those look like. Anything, but I just for now. Subordinates, develop yourselves. Leaders, take care of your subordinates and make sure that development happens. That's it.
I like it. All right, well.
All right, Rob.
Thanks, man, and I hope to have you back on.
Well, I'll be right down the road if you ever decide to not PCS.
Well, at this point, I think I'm retiring here. I don't know. I feel like I've been here forever.
I am so.